Hi everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Found Friday. I'm your host, Karen Skates, and with me today are Ray Grieselhuber, our CEO and founder, and Aaron O'Brien, COO. Hey everyone.
How's it going?
Hey.
Hope everyone's well today. Today is the last episode in a three-part series on keyword best practices for marketing and SEO teams. So far in this series, we've talked about using keywords and keyword groups to improve social media strategy and to inform relevant content creation. In today's episode, we're going to dive into paid media opportunities and how SEO and paid campaigns can benefit from the shared data collected from both efforts. So without further ado, let's get started. My first question is, when deciding which keywords to use in PPC campaigns, marketers need to know which keywords people are really searching for versus those we make up in our heads. So what's the best way to do that? Ray, do you think you could address that question?
Yeah, one of the best things about paid media, paid search in particular, is that there's a ton of data on what people are searching for. And if we're talking about Google AdWords, for example, they have a lot of tools built directly into the platform, such as the keyword discovery tool. We call it keyword discovery. It's basically keyword tools that allow you to find new recommendations for keywords that you would bid on for the ads, and they can get very specific. They can give you lots of data showing you how many people are looking for certain things on desktop versus mobile in pretty much every major region around the world.
All right, we've talked about keyword groups before. When we're using search data to inform paid content decisions, how can keyword groups help? Aaron, can you address that?
Yeah, so keyword groups allow you to really understand from kind of initially a search perspective from our point of view what's really working in segments that matter to your brand, as well as to measure your efforts more effectively after campaigns have run. So keyword groups as well as content groups can reflect things such as marketing campaigns, products, features, audience segments, geographies, whatever it is that you kind of really want to segment by. And this means you can actually see what types of keywords and topics are working well across efforts throughout all of your different marketing areas. So an example would be if you create keywords around a specific product that you're planning a campaign for, you'll actually be able to see what content is performing well with audiences organically and the corresponding keywords that actually led them to that content. And then what you can do is you can leverage that information to create better advertising and paid efforts that utilizes those keywords in the advertising, or to be able to lead to specific content that you actually know is relevant to your audience already.
Ray, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I totally agree with Aaron there. I think that the way that you approach grouping is it's really critical in terms of how you end up executing your strategy overall. It can be difficult to get started because people will often get very hesitant, very scared to start making any groupings because they know they're going to be using those groupings to make decisions and act on them, and so they just kind of put it off forever. But we always recommend starting with something that's a simple schema of different keyword groupings and seeing how that works and making sure it's actually actionable for you, and then rolling it out further once you've had a chance to really get a feel for how it works.
And how can marketers decide which keywords or keyword groups are likely to be those that lead to increased traffic and hopefully to conversions?
So I think that if you're creating keyword groups in an analytics platform that tracks traffic, conversions, social media, different kinds of data, you'll be able to quickly discern how audiences are reacting to your content in terms of final engagement. So whether, it's kind of clicks or follow through or abandonment, understanding which keywords and keyword groups are actually generating traffic on their own and the high performing content that they're matched to should naturally point to spots to include things like paid efforts that would better lead to conversions. And when we're talking about conversions specifically, I want to mention that conversions can be a number of things, right? So you can't take a singular approach to conversions, and marketers really need to pay attention to the multiple types of conversions that they're looking for. And it can include things like landing page visits, form fills, shopping cart ads, purchases. kind of a variety of different things, and so you can have kind of different conversions at different points in your marketing funnel if like the funnel model is something that you're doing. Since you're able to segment out keyword groups and conversion types, you can actually adjust your strategy depending on how keyword groups match up to conversion types, depending on where you're focusing. And that would mean that keyword groups that work well with like maybe initial landing page visits aren't the same that actually work well with audiences that are at the point of filling out a form or contacting a salesperson. So discerning kind of what keywords work well with what conversion types will help you better match your messaging and your media.
And Ray, can you talk a little bit about what the significance of meta keywords associated with landing pages are when deciding what keywords to bid on?
Yeah, actually, meta keywords are they're an older concept. They're not really used really on the paid side at all, and also on the SEO side, on the organic side anymore. They used to be a bigger deal, kind of in the earlier days of search engines, where marketers would use them to give a signal to the search engine to basically tell that search engine that this is what the major topic of the page was. So it originally had it was almost like giving the information on an index card in an old library, to tell like the searcher what a certain book was about. The problem with it, that's obviously a very easy thing to abuse, and when search engines weren't sophisticated enough to really determine the differences between the quality of different web pages, there is a big spam problem as a result. So Google has far moved beyond that. It doesn't even really look at the meta keywords tag anymore to determine relevancy of a keyword to the overall page. But there are still people who kind of talk about it as something that you want to focus on, but it's basically there isn't really much point. And then on the paid side, there's really nothing that would be relevant there that I can think of.
Okay. How can pay-per-click be used as a keyword testing platform for SEO?
So this is a really good technique, actually, because the biggest difference between paid and organic traffic acquisition is organic takes much longer, and there's no guarantee. The thing that is nice about paid is it's relatively deterministic. You have to bid appropriately. You have to have content that has a high enough quality score. You have to be bidding on keywords that are going to be relevant to the content. There's rules that you have to follow, but if you do those things and you spend enough money, then you will get your ads placed. With organic, there's no guarantee of any of that, and it's a much longer process. So a lot of times what you can do is after you've created new content, or if you're testing some new content ideas, you can use the paid side to throw some ads at them. And the acquisition cost of that traffic is going to be much higher, probably because you're using paid ads to actually acquire it. But what it will show you is how that content is going to perform for you post-click, post that user coming to your site. And that'll tell you important information like, is this content even relevant to them? Do they seem to be sharing it on social networks? Do they convert? Do they buy what you want them to buy, or do they get into your funnel appropriately? So it can be really useful for testing organic strategies very early on and not wasting a bunch of money on something that might not work for you in the long term.
All right. Using the most highly searched keywords can be expensive. So how can brands determine relevancy over popularity?
So I think this really goes back to what we're talking about with conversions earlier, and some things that we discussed earlier on in this series, which is that sometimes a keyword will be a great converter but doesn't have thousands of searches, right? So sometimes it'll be overlooked. And a lot of people will look at these keywords that have really high search volume and get scared away because what it has is an incredibly high cost per click or really high paid consequences. So this issue is where kind of really understanding SEO and conversion data can help you out. If you use the keywords that are best converters, but kind of lower cost, in your advertising, what you're really looking for is kind of a more targeted audience performance, right? So what you might have is something that has fewer impressions, but a much higher conversion rate on your advertising similar to your content, right? So you don't need 1 million views, you need 1,000 of the right views to get to kind of that same number. And so what you're really wanting is to prevent kind of this idea of a lot of like bounce out stuff. So I think this is what we're talking about with things being really expensive. Things that are really expensive are typically a lot broader terms that a lot of people are trying to compete for. Whereas if you look at specific phraseology, which is where we talk a lot about with SEO, is that what you're wanting to get to is what search engines are looking at, which is specific phrases, specific content. And we talked a lot about that last week too, which is really mapping kind of keyword and content stuff back together. So I think that relevancy is going to be these more specific phrases for most folks. And I think that, like we jokingly use the like running shoe thing all the time, but like if you are talking about something super specific like a, trail running shoe or a road running shoe, whatever it is, you don't necessarily want to try to rank for the word shoe, right? Like that's going to be expensive to try to purchase your way into. There's a lot of noise and clutter in that conversation with lots of different shoe varieties and brands and makers, etc. You want to get hyper specific to what your audience is talking about.
Ray, do you have something to add to that?
No, I think that Aaron really covered it there. The problem with trying to go after very competitive terms on paid is the same problem that you have with organic, in the sense that you're going to spend a lot more money than you need to really acquire that traffic, when you can make it up with much more of a long tail, highly targeted volume based approach, or volume across a longer tail of keywords.
Right. So what role do popular content and high converting landing pages play in the paid search ecosystem?
This is actually a really good topic, and it's probably something that we could talk about in further depth. So the high converted landing pages most concretely are going to benefit you, because the more Google sees your content performing well, for paid search, they're going to reward you with cheaper cost per click, because they're viewing you as having a higher quality score. So it's economically to your advantage to have high quality content that you're sending people to. And high quality is both a relative and objective term, but relatively speaking, if you have higher quality content to your compared to your competitors, then that's going to be really good. So high quality, high converting landing pages are very good. Popular content, it's kind of a different thing. You can use, popular content. I'm assuming that we're talking about content that has performed well in social, or maybe it's performing well on your site internally, where it's like a very popular page on your site. And it's more of a secondary benefit, where you've already demonstrated through traffic and social engagement that that content is something that people like to interact with. So that could be useful in finding new users, new visitors for your site that may not have come otherwise if they hadn't seen that ad, because for whatever reason, and getting them to engage with something that is a winning piece of content, and that can also drop them into the funnel quite nicely.
I kind of want to reference what we were talking about last week with that, because Ray's exactly right, which is like there's a really big difference here between kind of high converting landing pages and this idea of like popular content. So last week when we talked about evergreen content versus kind of popular or trending content and converting content, and how sometimes those are the same thing but not always, right? And we talked about it in terms of like the amount of resources that you expend putting towards each one of those different things. And I think what's important here with what we're talking about with paid effort is similar to what we're talking about when we're talking about kind of content creation and organic, is if something is a trending topic and not really going to be evergreen content, it has its use in this space, which is to draw in and engage new audiences potentially that might lead them to some evergreen content, to introduce them to your brand and products and services, and have these kind of relevant conversations. It's also a great way to test out some messaging and some topics. But I also would not expend a ton of resources. I think last week, I was kind of saying, if it's going to take you more than a couple of hours to create the content and get it approved and get it out there for a trending topic, it's probably not worth it, right? Because trending topics or really popular things tend to only be popular for a short period of time, as opposed to evergreen content, which is still findable for a long time afterward, which is where you really want to spend your paid efforts if you're doing that, right? Because what you want is these paid efforts to be an accompaniment to existing findability on search engines, because organic stuff is going to kind of keep traction rolling long after you've stopped paying for it. So a lot of times what people do is they'll use kind of like really great converting landing pages, and drive some paid efforts to it initially to kind of get the ball rolling. And then once it builds up steam, you can kind of taper off a little bit on the paid side and allow organic to take back over.
So how can looking at multi-channel results inform marketing strategy?
So we talked about this a little bit last week, and I think it's great to have Ray here on this one, because we chat a lot about this kind of when we're talking about the platform itself, and where to include data. One of the things that we talk about all the time, and I always want to stress, is that marketing and the idea of content and things is an ecosystem. So search, paid, social, whatever it is, this is all kind of part and parcel of a huge thing. So I think what happens is a lot of times we'll look at data and we'll say, as marketers, okay, these 2 or 3 channels are performing really well, and then we're not getting a lot of traction here, so I'm just going to turn this off. And you can't turn it off, right? Because sometimes a lot of things are kind of playing together to create awareness. So, that kind of old advertising maxim about, like 5 to 7 views or visuals, before somebody recognized your brands, which is why people were doing commercials and billboards and things like that. You don't put a big billboard up on the side of the road necessarily and then be like, oh, well, like I directly saw a conversion from that, right? Like what you're talking about is top of the mind awareness. And the internet has kind of become a really large Vegas style, like flashing billboard for a lot of things, which is why search and paid working together, also alongside social, gives you this ecosystem of lots of channels informing what really matters to your audience, right? Because looking at what people are searching for on search is going to help make sure that you're creating the most relevant content, and it's going to help you make sure that you're creating the most relevant ads using the best possible phrases and messaging to get to that content. So looking at what people's conversations are talking about on social can oftentimes be a really good indicator of what people will be searching for next, because a lot of times people will discuss something on social and then they'll go look for it, kind of on Google. And then after that, like they'll see ads, and that'll trigger, remembering when it comes time to purchasing decisions. So it really is one giant ecosystem. So not having all those departments talking to each other, I think, is a huge mistake, and not sharing data from one to the other is probably going to miss a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. I view I've been in kind of the search space for a long time, and the thing that I've always wished for, and always want to see more of, is better coordination between paid and organic. It's really hard. There's lots of reasons why it's not easy to do. The mindset that's required is totally different. The types of budgets that are required are totally different in terms of capital expenditures and like the way people budget for them in the first place. ROI calculations are completely different. And so that's probably a whole other topic as well, but there's lots of good reasons why they don't go together all the time. But they do work really well together because they complement each other in the areas where each individual channel is both has strengths and weaknesses. So on the strength side, with PPC, you get speed. With organic, you get long-term brand quality and higher conversion and higher loyalty, for all the content that's performing well. And the flip side of both of those is pretty much what you'd expect. With PPC, as soon as you stop paying for the traffic, it shuts off, just like a faucet. So with organic, you don't have speed. It takes a lot longer. So you can use the PPC to inform your organic strategy in a very effective way, the way we talked about, a few minutes ago. And you can use organic to boost that long-term customer engagement and loyalty.
So now how can this go full circle? How can marketers and SEO departments use PPC results to inform future content and landing page development?
It's kind of what we were just talking about. So it's basically the ability to get faster feedback from the paid search side to the content team is, we've talked about some concrete ways and way that would work, but it's really good, and it can be a critical part of your strategy if you make it work.
I think that a lot of what we're talking about is interesting in the fact that we don't think that there's just like this one way type of communication, which is like, oh, take your search information and use it to inform paid, or take your paid information and use it to inform search. The idea is what you need to really be looking at is what's working across all of these things. And I'm going to go back to the same thing I say I think every week. So I know people are either getting sick of hearing it, but the funny thing is I'm still not seeing it happen. So, like I'm going to keep saying it until I see somebody doing it. The medium, the method, and the message, right? The idea is we really want to know what specifically is working, where it's working, and why it's working. So sometimes what you'll see is like it's easy when it actually all works, like across all channels. Like say you hit on a topic and have some content that worked really well on search and really well on paid. Great, fine, fantastic. That's the easy part. What happens when something's performing really well on search but like it sucks on advertising, or works really well on advertising but sucks on search, right? Like that's where you need to be having these conversations. Or say you're finding conversations in social that are happening around your industry, but you can't seem to get content together that resonates with your audience, or that works really well in paid. These are the kinds of questions where examining the medium, the method, and the message, and doing what we talked about last week, which is those discovery boards, will help you better understand how you could be converting better, how you could be creating content that works better across all of these mediums, how you could be creating messaging strategies that will actually work to engage and convert your audience. The discovery board thing is actually really important to kind of touch back on, because when you're struggling to figure out why other people are creating content that's working, and you've tried search and paid and social and nothing is kind of connecting, you need to see what people are going to, and then you really need to like break it down using kind of the breakdown methods that we talked about. And once you're doing kind of the break it down method and you've got like 5 to 10 different pieces of content that you've analyzed, hopefully what you're starting to see is some similarities in either the medium, the method, or the message. So like, is video really what you need to be working on, or is it more like slide presentations or quick blog posts, or is it that they're talking about the topic in a really specific way, or is it that they're just sharing it in the right channels? Is for some reason like Pinterest really catching fire for that audience, and you just don't have a really good Pinterest following? Like that's how you need to be breaking stuff down, I think, to kind of create this like more full circle idea. So you don't want just this like one way communication, like send me your data, other department.
We've talked in the last 3 weeks about using keywords across all kinds of functions, across social and search and content creation and paid. So it seems like this full circle concept, and the sharing data. I know everyone's talking about silos and breaking down silos, but more and more it seems to be able to get those relevant audiences, you've got to be able to do that.
Ironically, people have been saying this breakdown silos thing for years and years, I mean, probably for decades. But I actually just see the silos getting taller, which is distracting and scary. And it's not in every organization, obviously. Not every organization makes these silos. I think what happens is the silos seem to get bigger as teams and channels and functions continue to grow. So one of the things that, we talked about a long time ago that, is still a challenge for a lot of folks, is that as marketing channels and like social media channels and all these different things continue to like explode and almost like supernova, right? Like they'll come out, they'll like be a huge bang, and then some of them will die off, and all these things happen. Companies will form a team around that, like, oh, like that's our Twitter team, and this is our Facebook team, and like, oh, there's like a social umbrella over here, because like it just becomes this big colossal thing and somebody has to manage it. And then they create their own reporting and analytic structures. The problem happens when you put those people into a group, they have their own reporting and their own analytics, and it doesn't tie back to like what the overall team and company is doing, and everybody's not on the same page. In fact, Ray just gave a talk at PR Summit, 2 days ago, about matching reporting back to kind of like company goals. And it was specifically aimed kind of towards agencies, but it can also be used as a really good model for in-house teams as well.
Yeah, definitely.
And that slide share from his talk will be on our website today, as a matter of fact. So you can look for that. It's also on SlideShare. So
Erin created that beautiful SlideShare.
Don't worry, I put my name at the end.
Okay, good. I don't want to get the wrong idea.
I signed every page lovingly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this edition of Found Friday. If you have questions or comments, you can email any of us, Ray, Aaron, or Karen at ginzametrics.com, or start a conversation with us on Twitter at #FoundFriday. If you guys don't have anything else, I guess that's it.
Sounds good. Everybody have a good Friday.
All right, you too. See you guys next week.
Bye.